In three, two, one. Good morning, everybody. Have an enjoyable Saturday morning. As you can see, we've made a couple visual changes around here. And I'll tell you why. Quick story before we get started. What's the topic today, you ask? Oh, that's going to be a surprise. You're going to love it, though. I think you will. If you guys have noticed, or anybody who's been on this YouTube channel for a while, and for those who haven't, please subscribe, like, do all the nice stuff. You already know how to do it, but if I suggest it, the guy who forgot will probably do it, and that'll be great for everybody, yada, yada, yada. So if you've joined Red Pill and been in Red Pill for any length of time, a lot of it is telling guys a bunch of steps they need to take to achieve their successful sexual strategies. In other words, that means abundance, the quality and the quantity of women in some variation are there for you. So my contribution to it is I figure if we're telling guys how they need to short-term pain for long-term success, why then are we giving them that kind of content in the laziest possible way? So I did what any normal red pill person would do. When I get into something, do it properly. And for the longest time, I've been studying how to do better video editing. So when I put a video together for you guys, there's an underlying story that helps you understand the concepts along with the surface conversation. It also teaches on subtext, which is a really great thing about dealing with women. Now I'm obviously on cinematography. So good morning, John Ty. Good morning, Jack. Good morning, JD. Good morning, RO Flex. Good morning, Jack Donovan's butt plug. Miss you in the Patreon. Anybody here from the Patreon? I recognize a few of you guys. I hope you enjoyed last night. It's a bit of a different thing than we usually do for our Q&As, but I thought you would like the surprise. And we figured we just keep that one on the download. Didn't want to announce it to everybody. So if you enjoyed it, congratulations. If we glossed over your questions in a way that you'd like more, we'll get to those ones too. Just make sure to let me know and we'll address that. Also, is anybody here wearing pajamas today? Patreon guys will know that. Are you wearing pajamas with your brother-in-law? Yeah. Yeah, thank you for the lighting. I've been fiddling around with different colors here, and I was thinking the cyan is one I'm going to stick with because then I can work with edge lighting around the front here to give it a more yellow one. It's called the intellectual color scheme, where it's blues and oranges are the main two colors. The idea is it gives the subtext of not just sitting here blathering about how bad the women are. Am I right, though? The women are bad. And we can actually talk about things that affect us in a more practical level. Hope everybody's enjoying coffee. Carlin A's. Also, apologies. I still haven't put my medals back in the shadow box after Remembrance Day. I will get on that. But until then, we're just going to have to sit it there. So, enough preamble. What's the topic for today? That's funny because there it is. I've been thinking about this one for a while. Chris Z or Zed, depending on which side of the 49th you're on. Thank you for the 99-cent super chat. Always appreciative. Everybody, give this man much love in the chat. The light fits your shirt. Yeah, I thought, what the hey, let's go with something more colorful. But so if you guys don't know, I've essentially culled my following list on Twitter. If you look at it now, I think there's 15 people, if that. It clicked on me one day and it's funny because if you guys haven't seen Carl's latest tweet where he talks about 90% of the manosphere are gossiping thoughts. And I love how we kind of come to the same conclusion at different times through different means. I didn't like, and I don't think it does you guys a good service when we talk about sexual strategy and things you can do in certain situations to maximize your benefit or minimize your risk. When the most loud and boisterous, most prolific posters set the tone for the day. One guy puts out a tweet saying these are the 7 habits that you need to be a good woman on. Feminists get mad. And then all of a sudden, 5 more of them come up in the woodwork. Granted, I've done it myself because, every now and then the audience needs red meat and we need engagement. I get the game. But I didn't want to have you guys see me just regurgitating whatever the topic du jour was. So, and then I figured, what's the point of following like Rich or Rollo or Carl? Like I could just call them or drive to their house. So if I want to know what they're up to, I just talk to them like a normal human being. And I thought all this time we're talking about guys building healthy social lives. I think it would behoove me to at least be the example myself and just do that and have a social life outside of the internet. So it's a twofold thing. I'm going to give you guys fresher, more unique, and more, I don't want to say structured, but it's essentially focused less on the drama of the day and more on timeless content. And then less on, what did Pat Stedman say to Rollo today? Which, by the way, I have to avoid those because they're so damn tempting. His dunk ability is off the charts. Rule 0. That's a good answer here. Question here from Chris. Rule 0, if I'm not mistaken, is on Rich's channel today. He will be sending me a link at some point, so I'll make sure to put that one in the chat once I get it. I think he's got it on his feed as well. I'll tell you what, I'll just pull it up right now. If you're listening to this one on SoundCloud or Spotify or any of the other streaming platforms, thank you for sticking around. I've been a bit slow. Right now it's like November 20th, and I just started uploading the audio again to get caught up from October. 3 weeks behind. Apologies for that. I'm going to come up with a better system on these things because the process is kind of weird. All right, I don't see the link yet, but I'll get it there. Now, the topic. I talk about this one all the time. I thought, why don't we go back to the basics? A lot of guys here, and I've noticed this, we'll get on a call, we'll have a consult, I'll get an email from you in response to my email list, and I always ask, well, when you say you're red-pilled, like, what have you done so far? And I'll usually get a very similar answer. It's, I've read The First Year Rational Male, and I've watched some podcasts. And I thought, that's kind of a bad thing because there's so much more, and we don't really even show you guys where to start looking. And that's on us. So I'm going to start adding, where is it? Screen share. We're going to look and start from the beginning. Bum, bum, bum. There we are. Hawaiian Libertarian. Game is the red pill. This is the very first piece of red pilled content that's ever been released. That was ever released. Oh, there's got to be a way I can zoom on that. It's funny because he's not the biggest poster. He's not the most prolific poster, but that's much better. But he is the guy that kind of got this thing started. Now, obviously, this was around the time when Rollo was still just a moderator on SoSuave. It's 2009. For anybody who's been following my email list for a length of time, this was right around the time I was telling the stories of me in Dubai with the flight attendant, or the shipside party where I met my girl. All these stories. It's all around this time, which is kind of funny because then I was still pretty much mystery method 100%. And then it's just kind of neat to see how these guys moved on and found something different. Oh, this one, by the way, huge tragedy. Doesn't get notifications for most of us anymore. I don't know if that's a YouTube thing or what. I'll do my best to start tweeting more about when these things are coming up. So at the very least, even if we don't get notifications through the YouTube app like it's supposed to, there's at least some way of you guys being able to keep up, because God knows I'm busting my ass getting you guys content as best I can. I would hate for you to miss stuff that you'd want to see because you just didn't know it was there. Now, this, I don't know what came up before this one. It was some argument between pickup artists, MGTOWs, MRAs, yada, yada, yada. And these conversations are the exact same ones we still have today. So nothing's really changed, which kind of makes it, I don't know, useless to have a debate or an argument. People kind of have their sides and they do what they do. I had a couple of the honey badgers yesterday. I don't know if you guys know who they are, but they're the matriarchs of the men's rights activist movement, kind of asking me what I disagree with on them. But it's weird. I get that same vibe you get when you're, when you're arguing with a girl who wants to start a fight, and she goes, why would you say that? Why would you say that? And you could tell it's just asking her for permission to run her mouth. So I'm like, yeah, we disagree. Let's just leave it at that. I don't feel like arguing with a middle-aged soccer mom on the internet. Well, then plus, I mean, it's not like it's a feminist where I know they would gladly do all kinds of crap that's not in my best interest. At least the MRA have a good heart. Their heart's in the right place. So I don't feel like butting heads over that. It's not really worth it. And then this is where he kind of brings up why the Matrix allegory was here. And he talks about it. It's like, I'll quote it for you guys. Like, something happens, which makes us question those very rituals we've blindly followed, and we are confronted with a choice. Shall we take the blue pill and ignore the inconsistencies with our own paradigm, which works pretty well? Or shall we take the red pill and explore these inconsistencies, knowing that it could lead us to a world we aren't familiar with, one that questions the very foundations of our current perspective? Now, he uses the word perspective here, and I use the word mental models, and we're essentially talking about the same thing. He does make a nuanced point here that I think a lot of people in the manosphere, that 90% that Carl talks about, he makes a lot of them miss the point. It's that living in a blue pill world, it's livable. Like, it's not Mad Max out there. Yeah, there's a good chance that Karen can take the kids and you won't see them until they're adults. There's a good chance your boss is going to get as much as he can from you while offering as little in return. Yeah, you have a good chance of getting Me Too'd, so you eventually have to teach your coworkers like poison. But it's not like you're going to be in medieval India and you're going to starve in the streets, or you're in the movie The Grave of the Fireflies where you slowly die over a 2-hour period. Like, it's livable. But he goes, I don't want livable. I want to see if there's something better. And it's kind of a key point of masculinity. I know we talk endlessly about masculinity, but one of the few things that we have that separates us from the women, I love that word, by the way. One thing that separates us is the ability to absorb risk. Now, yeah, I guess I'll ramble a bit. There's obviously reasons that you can explore risk. A lot of the androgen in a guy's body has the side effect that it mutes our, I want to say it mutes our emotional response. Where people think that girls are too emotional. It turns out guys are just muted, so we don't register the emotions until a certain point. So it's not that they're too emotional. It's just ours are specifically muted. And that's a biological facet of having 17 times the testosterone going through your body. So part of this is a risk. He's saying, okay, I got this 5 out of 10 life, the 5 out of 10 story. I know how the story ends. I know the hardships, and I can live with that. Or you can take a risk. And it's entirely possible that you end up like one of those, like I said, like Carl said, the 60% of content creators that didn't make rent last month, which rent, fair enough. That's a packed statement if I ever heard one. Or you can take that risk going, okay, so maybe there's a chance of me doing something better. And you see examples of this everywhere. Tate, and I'm never going to stop dick riding this guy because I like the guy and I don't trust him. I get no Marty douche. He gets notifications from my mom. That's very nice. Yeah, so Tate did just that. He had his kickboxing career and he didn't like where that whole pathway was going, where he's going to be the old punched out boxer, middle-aged, wife takes his belts and the divorce kind of thing. And so what did he do? He called up all the thoughts that he knew and he started up a cam business, became a digital pimp, flies around the world. Obviously, he's doing well for himself, but it's because he took that risk. Now, for every Tate out there, there's 100 different, I can't think of an example because they don't really make the news. The guy who tries all that stuff and ends up living in a shanty by the beach in Thailand, and good for him. Like, it's livable. He won't starve to death, but that's the point, is that you kind of want better, or you at least don't want to take the same path that it's usually the path that your parents took. Your dad got divorce raped by mom, and because he had worked his whole life on being the provider and she was the stay-at-home mom, she got to keep the kids. He had to pay her for the privilege. It was a very self-inflicted, sabotaging mental model, and I don't like that. I saw, when I was a kid, I was in a small town in BC, and the entire town was hit by NAFTA. If you guys remember, NAFTA was like the early 90s North American Free Trade Agreement. There was this issue with softwood lumber tariffs, which prevented softwood from BC heading down to the States. And so it just gutted the industry. And when I watched that, I saw a few things. I saw a bunch of guys who did the TradCon thing where, you know, I put bacon on the table, or I bring home the bacon and put food on the table. My wife takes care of the kids and shows gratitude for my hard work. And then we get the gold watch at the end, and everybody dies surrounded by each other. And like that whole Norman Rockwell. Actually, I guess I should explain that one too. I'm finding a lot of my explanations, guys kind of forget where they came from. When I mentioned Norman Rockwell, it's if you guys remember, there's a painting called American Gothic. I'll pull it up so you can see. American Gothic. It's probably the most famous thing of his that you guys will mostly know about. It's going to be a Mental Floss article, but that's all right. Let's pull this one up here. Mental Floss. Chrome tab. By the way, awesome StreamYard option where they allow you to specifically pick a Chrome tab and it can automatically stream it at your screen share. These guys are absolutely wonderful. And every time I have a complaint, it's almost like the next podcast it's on. They're coloring the super chat so I can actually see you guys again. Awesome. So this is the one you might know, American Gothic. Norman Rockwell, he had an Americana thing to him. He liked drawing America as a... I'm going to go back to Gamers Repeal. Americana as an aspirational model. If you guys think of like the 1950s and that golden age thing, you're essentially thinking of a Norman Rockwell painting. He did a bunch of Reader's Digest advertisements. Essentially, anytime you think of like the golden age of when men were men and when women were women, it's him trying to sell you cigarettes. So when I talk about the Norman Rockwell paintings, what I refer to is these guys that base their lives off of advertisements from the 1940s, 30s, 20s, 50s, that whole era. So they're not actually wanting to be traditional, conservative, or tradcon. They want to live that aspirational model, not realizing that it was actually just an advertisement. So it's got this diluted aspect to it too. Where was I going with this one? Yeah, so it's almost an ideology. I know we talk about the consumerism ideologies and stuff like that, but I mean, it's essentially that. You've gotten to the point that selling your feeling, like using emotional resonance to sell product has now become people's mental models. Now, some guys pull it off. If you see Tanner, and granted, he's into the LDS, the Mormon community. He's got his second wife, and they're doing their thing, and he's living the dream. But he's got a whole social network that kind of combined to it. So I have a hard time believing that these TradCon guys actually want this, because if they did, I would probably say the Muslim or the Mormon community is your best chances. I'm not saying that they're impervious to this stuff, because God knows there's plenty of enough Mormon porn stars and Muslim porn stars out there. And I think they even have that hymen reattachment surgery. So they're not living the dream either, but at least the odds are slightly better. But then again, if you just want to live not to lose, fill your boots. I don't see a lot of people signing up to Salt Lake City on this one. So it's almost like they just want the world to accommodate them, as opposed to making the moves that they need to get what they want out of life. So it's very, and that's why we talk about it as blue pill, because these guys are just wishing in one hand and shitting in the other, and they're going to see what pops out first. And he goes later on here, and it's, you know what, for such an old post, it's very dense and packed with things that a lot of people really don't understand about it. He talks about the symptoms manifesting all over the place. And the example I like where... And this just refers to when I talk about neuroplasticity, how guys are set in a certain set of mental models that only change once you've experienced a trauma. Essentially what he's bringing up here, like once in the new paradigm, we can no longer believe the older belief as our truth. Very cool. There we go. This is the part that I was talking about here, where you can see how it manifests. And he actually used married examples, which is awesome. And whenever a woman asks which two paint colors you prefer, you have to say that you don't care. The alternative is picking the wrong color and paying dearly for it. And I love the way he phrased it. He calls it blue pill induced paranoia, the fear of paying dearly for upsetting a woman. Dalrock has a great post on this one too, where he calls it's called Threat Point, I believe. And he uses other very common examples. Do you think that girl's prettier than me? The wrong answer is yes. The wrong answer is no. Either you don't think I'm pretty or you're a liar. And so he finds himself avoiding talking to her at all. And these are just, when we think of a shit test or a fitness test, these are the first time that people kind of saw, oh, okay, so that's what these things are. And then they kind of, other guys, and this is the swapping notes part. And I freaking love this part of the red pill. It's so neat to watch a plan come together. It's like the A team, but with sex and not BA. So this is when he finally learns about a fitness test. And he goes, oh, okay. So if you react in a way that tries not to anger the woman or walking on eggshells, it's generally a display of lower value and you shouldn't do it. Oh yeah, then the 6-month headache for a guy who just wants to sleep with his wife. Honestly, I would suggest you guys give this one a read. The part I'm going to go on here, and he goes on more about the wife's emotional state, where he talks about, for the majority of husbands, they married a woman who could communicate with and formed an allegiance to. Her attitude then became far less tolerant and hostile after. And I think this is the key point, and this is where, I mean, anybody who's been here for a while, they'll know. I recommend Dr. Glover's No More Mr. Nice Guy and Manuel Smith's When I Say No, I Feel Guilty, because this right here, I think, is the singular largest and most common issue for men in a relationship, period. It's the idea that upsetting the woman is just not done. It's like sacrosanct. And hey, morning, Conks in the chat. Also, I see John, JD, Tea Like Oil, Eric Von Weedle, Guten Tag. And this is where I don't like the trad guys, because all they do is they talk about doubling down. Well, you need to do, and I know they would say, no, we're not saying just do more chore play. They're not saying it, but everything that they suggest that you should do, categorical imperative, everything that you should do leads to that conclusion. And so I find it very disingenuous when guys are offering this advice on what men should do. And that's when I talk about sheep in search of a shepherd. Tell me what I have to do to get the outcome I want. And that's all guys want. I think it's a horrible way to look at it, because it just doesn't work. And you're trusting the other person knows what they're doing. I don't know about you, but I'm not going to trust a guy who is 4 years into his first marriage telling me that, oh, marriage is easy. You just got to do this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, all right, let's wait till the honeymoon phase wears off. Let's wait till you sit there and dropping C-bombs on each other on a Thursday night because somebody bought the wrong type of ground beef. Then talk to me about a relationship. Even me, like, I'm learning things all the day. I'm still, 11 years in now? I'm still on these guys that have been in for 30 years, like, oh, yeah. And I kind of already see down the line, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, what are things that are most likely going to happen at those certain checkpoints. And it's nice. And it's the best part about swapping notes. But it's this here. The walking on eggshells, the fear of hurting the women, the Venus of Willendorf. It's one of those manifestations of guys that worship women. And when guys think it's about worshiping women, they think that just means white knighting. Like, no. It's stuff like this. It's the guy. I love that transition. It's the guys that, you know, when you hear the term God-fearing Christians, it's like that, but God-fearing pedestalization of women. Walking on eggshells, afraid of hurting her feelings, for usually two reasons. One, you just want it to end. You don't like conflict. You don't like when people are mad at you. And so you just do what you have to do to keep things even keel. By the way, that type of conscientiousness, prevalent among women. The fact that it's creeping into the male sphere of influence lets you know Rollo has a point when he talks about men being raised as defective women. Guys aren't afraid of conflict, or they're not supposed to be. And that's part of the chemical part, and that's another reason why lifting is so important. Get your hormones in balance. Ask anybody here, and if anybody's been in the chat, has ever been on TRT, they'll tell you that their tolerance for things goes up because it just doesn't click on the radar anymore. They tend to be more aggressive, and they're less likely to back down from any type of disagreements, which is awesome because it establishes your boundaries. Where was I going with this one? Communicate, form an allegiance, attitude, far less hostile. Yeah, so the fear thing. So that's the part of it that I just want it to end. Second part of it is you're worried about having the sex cut off. For a guy, sex is like food. It's you have to eat or you're going to starve. You don't have to eat all the time. You're not constantly thinking about food, but if you haven't eaten, that's all you can think about. Again, the male hormone, it's exactly where it goes to on that. And when you add that with scarcity or the idea that you don't know, or you have to, this is the only one I'm going to have, this is all I got working for me, then yeah, you treat it with more, I can't think of a negative word to use, but I'll just use reverence. The worship. It's okay. You can start the show. Yeah, the coldest. Actually, I just had my allergies tested. I found out why. So you got to think about this. And if the issue is, if your wife doesn't sleep with you, you will not have sex, and then you'll have all the problems that come with that. So what do you do? And here's where I have a disagreement, not with tradcons as people, but with tradcons as in the way that they frame their world and the way they work with it. A tradcon will tell you to communicate. A marriage counsel will tell you to communicate. A woman will tell you to communicate. Middle-aged soccer moms will tell you to communicate. Everybody tells you to talk more. And anybody who slept with more than one woman in her life will tell you cannot talk your way into their pants. It has to be a visceral thing. And just because you married her doesn't mean all of a sudden that her limbic brain stops working. So then you realize that the conversation itself has nothing to do with attraction. So communication doesn't have anything to do with attraction. At best, you're going to get a starfish, wifely duty type sex. And I've got hundreds of clients, hundreds of field reports, all expressing that is one thing that guys definitely do not want. So I'm comfortable in admitting that no guy just wants a girl to sit there and act like a sex doll. Hope you guys are enjoying your coffee. So now you realize communication doesn't work. And for those who still doubt me, just try it a bit and you'll see it doesn't work. Women have a lot more mental tools at hand. And more importantly, they don't, like if you're playing chicken, you're always going to flinch first with these type of communication tools. It's just the way it is. The only tool a guy has is his ability to walk away. And I don't know if Hawaiian Libertarian got to that at the end of his. Let's go back to that and take a quick look. Let's make it big so you guys can see it. There we go. Invite a firestorm in his home. Yeah, so he kind of acknowledges that, yeah, these kind of things create friction and guys tend to not like friction. And this is where it taps into what Dalrock called threat point earlier. I'll pull that one after. The idea that a guy is afraid of pissing off his wife because he'll lose access to his children and quite possibly have to pay her for the privilege to have somebody else raise his kids. Then he follows it up with this piece here, really wonderful, because if a married man stands up for himself in today's climate, he could very well find himself put out of his own house and paying a substantial chunk of his paycheck to his ex-wife and seeing the kids when and if she decides to. It's the emasculation paradox, which we don't really talk about enough. And this is where I disagree with the MRAs. So they seem to think that this is a legal issue that has a legal solution. They use the same female tools that got things like the Duluth model and all those other male bias laws into place. And the funny thing, I'm going to give a shout out to Hi Civ, Legal Smeagol. He's been on the cast before. I'm probably going to have him on again when he gets the spare time, but lawyers are always busy. He noticed this too. Like, yeah, the laws are perfectly balanced. Like people think that there's some kind of gender skewed laws, but they're not. And that's the thing. It's not that the laws are skewed. It's that the choices men and women make cause them to manifest as being skewed. It's the same as, think of girls in STEM. Everybody's saying there's not enough girl scientists, not enough girl mathematicians, not enough girl engineers. It's not because there's not enough opportunity for them to pursue these paths. God knows people are bending over backwards to put any woman in front of a computer they can. They've even done, a couple studies came out saying they're earning like 10% more on average, easily able to get promoted, if for no other reason than just to signal that the company treats diversity as sacrosanct. But women aren't going into those. Why? Because they just don't want to. So take that same understanding of people's choices, creating different outcomes, and apply it to the legal system. If you're a guy who wants to bring home the bacon, put food on the table, leave the wife as a stay-at-home mom, you're actively encouraging the legal framework to suggest that you've decided to take this woman on as a dependent for life or until somebody else marries her. So right there, you've actually set up the emasculation paradox for your own life. Now, what are solutions to this? Well, that all depends. And this is the part that matters to you, to me, to everybody. So what do you do about it? And this is another reason I love how I haven't been following a lot of content creators at all lately. Most guys will stop right there. This is unfair. Whamming this, whamming that, whamming bad. I want to see my kids. Karen took the damn kids. But they never say, okay, what do you do about it? Well, I'm going to mention an old story from a guy. I bring him up on occasion, Ultimate Cad. He, awesome dude. Batman origin story is pretty simple. His wife most likely went out and cheated on him. But it wasn't that set him off. It was that he kind of knew something was up. He knew she had gone to a certain place at a certain time to meet a certain person. And he asked, oh, where were you? I tried to call you and take you out to lunch. And she lied flat out to him. So that for him, that was enough. The fact that she had to lie about going out to meet somebody else meant she's probably hiding something, or at the very least, doesn't respect me enough to be honest with me for whatever reason. And then he kind of looked in the mirror, which most red-pilled guys do. And they go, oh, can't blame her though, because look at me, I'm a schlub. So he did what very few guys do, and what most guys would be better off doing. I'm not going to say should. He got himself in killer shape. He... Thank you very much, Sam. You know what? Sam gets a cop for this one. Got himself into killer shape. He built up his game. He essentially switched off, and he did what I call Operation Scorched Earth. I get my way, or I burn this to the ground and walk off. Awesome. I got to keep paying attention to this chat. I'm on the post there, so I want to make sure I don't miss any super chats if you guys have some questions, because I love answering them. You can tell I devote like 2 hours every week just to doing it with Patreon. By the way, join if you want to. Awesome group, awesome community. We've already got like 20 episodes in there. It's a huge amount of content, and a lot of the guys are swapping notes. Private community still getting up and going. Quick update on that one, by the way. If I don't see those forums up, I know it's running a little bit late right now, but at a certain point, I'm probably just going to say screw it, find a different platform, and build one there. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, so it's the choices you make. So yeah, a working wife is, I would consider it a non-starter as a strategy. If you want to stave off the damage of divorce, two things that happen. One, stay-at-home moms get bored. They get hugely bored, especially once you're outside of the poverty level. A lot of people say, well, cooking and cleaning and la-da-da. Like, yeah, we're not in the 1700s. They aren't beating shirts against a rock. You don't have to start the fire under your stove, and you don't have to cook all damn day. Right now, outside of the formative first couple years of a child's life, it's basically a part-time job. They're at school for 8 hours. You get them between 8 and 6. And after a couple of years, they're mostly just going to be doing their own thing. Unless you want to be one of those ultra hardcore parents that drives them to 8 different types of practices and turns them into helicopter parents. I wouldn't suggest that either. So it's not enough time to fill up the duties required to raise a child today. People are going to argue that's the hardest job in the world, but I've got enough single dads in here talking about how they managed to handle it just fine with a little bit of planning. So I would say that's a personal problem and not so much a systemic problem. You get a girl that's bored with that much time off, what do? They shop and they socialize. So right there, as soon as you're not her best option in her eyes, that socialization and privacy that exists sets you up for failure. And the way the laws are set up right now, because they've reduced no fault, or they've created no fault or divorce, which means once two people decide to split up, the courts aren't going to try and mitigate that at all. They're just going to consider it a division of assets, run in the formula, 50-50 split, whatever you do. Problem is the guy's the only bread earner and the girl's a socialite. So you can see how this thing skews based on people's choices, not so much legal. What are you doing in here, Chomsky? Looks like one of the dogs is minding his own business across the street, so he decided to lose his mind. But so these are the choices you got to make then. Okay, so do I risk all this divorce stuff because I want to have somebody home part-time and washing the dishes? Most guys, probably not. It's not ideal, especially since, like, automatically from all that extra work you do and all the extra parenting she does, you're essentially establishing that you don't want the kids in a divorce, and you may not, but you will pay for that privilege. I don't find it ideal. I've seen way too many parents have that situation, and it basically screws up the kids. So right there, maybe a better solution is for wife, or girlfriend, go get a job, keep yourself busy, bring some income in, show that you're just as invested in this. Same as you. Well, maybe I'll walk back my work or business, not pull those extra overtimes to help make ends meet. She can make ends meet, and I could take that extra time to maybe learn, the best friend of my goddamn kid. So in the event that things dissolve, you're in a much better position to have proper access to your children, to financially be about equivalent quality of life as you were when you started. And you'll see a lot of wealthier, like upper middle class type incomes, that top 10% stuff. It works out much better for them in that regard, because if you're a doctor earning 150,000 a year and she's a doctor earning 150,000 a year, you do a split of assets, you guys are mostly going to come out ahead, as opposed to the guy who's the doctor pulling out 300,000 a year and his stay-at-home wife. That guy is probably going to lose 200,000 a year, God knows, if not more. So from a financial standpoint, the decisions kind of make themselves there. But it only really works when you understand what it is you want. A lot of guys get hoodwinked by not tucking my kids in every night and kissing them on the forehead would be the worst thing for me. But that's not raising children. That's wanting to be a dad. And that's totally different. That's a feeling, and that's using the kids as props for your own emotional fulfillment. I don't find that's very healthy. I don't like it. I kind of equate that to people who keep posting their kids on Twitter, doing this, that, and the other thing. I'm not judging them for it, whatever, but I just don't like the children as props for emotional fulfillment. Yeah. Also, yeah, kudos to Pepe D's Nuts. I agree. Glad you're free and happy now. And so this kind of started the whole idea of the red pill. And he actually does some pretty good ideas at the end there. Don't worry about upsetting her. She's a woman. Women get upset as surely as the sun rises in the east. I can vouch for that. And then when contemplating why we have 70 to 80% of women initiating no-fault divorces, there's more to it than women are just greedy, slutty, or adulterous. Or simply because it's the nature of women. Yeah, there's most certainly a bunch that are that type. But it's kind of a stretch to take that and assume that all women are just hoes, and that's what it is. Or hypergamy is some kind of automatic script that runs like the Manchurian Candidate. They get that tune when the kid turns 5 and they up and move. There's a social aspect of it. The fact that there's no social stigma around it anymore means it's fine. I remember back in like the 70s, if a girl was divorced, the girls in the neighborhood would basically ostracize her. Get out of here, not part of the group. But then after a while, that became like a normal thing, having the divorced girl. And a lot of guys here who are on the older side will probably know this, that the best indicator, if you're going to have a divorce, well, one of the best one is technically a guy losing his job and the provider nature of the role. But another one is when one of her friends divorces, because they tend to spill through like a virus. Girls are very herd-like that way. And so he suggests taking a more nuanced view of it. You look at relationships from an attraction standpoint first. Am I her best option? Am I does her hypergamous instinct think of me as the one she's, devoutly loyal to or not? And if not, just there for the convenience. The divorce is just waiting for an opportunity to happen. And that's the guys that get fat. That's the guys who work too much. Don't like all those reasons that a girl gives for a divorce. It all stems from, does she consider you her best option? Is she attracted to you? And that's not always like, am I the best man ever? Case I had ex-addict bro, another guy I've known for a long time, tons of field reports. His wife was essentially an enabler. And once he decided, you know what, it's not worth it for my family, I'm going to get clean, do my own thing, hence the username. She decided that she no longer had her charity case, and then she left. So sometimes the best option doesn't mean that you're as close to Chad as you can be. Some girls just like damaged men because they're easy, they have no other options, and it's simple. Some girls are just lazy, same as guys are. Some girls are just drunk and they do that stuff just like guys are. And so best option doesn't always mean what it thinks it means. But, and then you take this further, you take this in a new post, you find that a lot of guys will, okay, you get into good shape. And that, by good shape, I don't mean just, yoked, 250-pound muscle beast. Usually a more lean. Think swimmer's build, not so much bodybuilder. You get to that point, and then more importantly, you'll get a better attitude. To be more attractive stuff. It's fairly straightforward, and everybody agrees that's very conservative, consistent advice across any sphere you can find. Work out, be fit, trim, style, all that stuff. It's the not being unattractive stuff, and that's the stuff where Red Pill kind of stands alone. And that's the aloofness. That's always be willing to have one foot out the door, or that your needs come first to you. It's a very selfish quality that pickup artists learn when they talk about, alpha males. I hate talking about it like that, but you get what I'm saying. And that certain selfishness actually appeals to people because they're like, okay, this guy is going to get his, so I want to kiss up to him. It's the same as the guy who brown noses the boss. He doesn't brown nose, Debbie from marketing. He brown noses the guy who has the power in the organization. Same thing here. Now, once you got your be attractive and your don't be unattractive in order, this is where a lot of guys hit this moment, and I love seeing it. I see it in the chat often enough during these things. I occasionally see it. Catching up with the chat here. You occasionally see it in emails or phone calls, and guys are just amazed. They're like, oh my God, I did not realize what the secret society was like. And that's another article I'll pull up here. Type that as I'm talking. If you guys don't know, I think it was Tyler Durden. Never find where the original one is. There's always a lot of people talking about it, but nobody just quotes it, which is the way better way to do it. Oh, you son of a bitch. Stupid spam site. Secret Society, I think it's absolutely awesome. Okay, we'll go to Krauser. Krauser's got it. I'm going to stop this one. I'm going to switch over to this. Go with the Krauser link. It's not ideal. There's some better ones, but I don't want to have you guys watch me surfing the net here for 20 goddamn minutes. 5 mindsets that you just don't get it. Yeah, sure, why not? Oh, he never did send the quote. That's stupid. All right, screw it. We're just going to cancel that one here. We'll do this the old-fashioned way. I'll just talk about it because I still remember it. And he talks about the secret society as, and it's not an actual secret society. They don't have meetings with goat heads. But back there. Secret society is this thing where guys who get it versus guys who don't. And he refers to it as a club of all the women and about 5% of guys. And that's where it's non-judgmental, sex positive. And he talks about all the different things he noticed that he gets treated differently on when you're part of that secret society and those who aren't. And this is essentially what it means to just be attractive, truly Chad-like. And that's why you see the concept that Rollo calls blue pill alphas, because a lot of these guys, of course, they're going to have an ultra positive view of life. They're going to talk about being vulnerable. They're going to talk about feelings because they've built up the attractiveness threshold to a point where they can have these unattractive behaviors. And to them, it's almost a flex. It's the same as when you see hipster girls dressed in horrible outfits. It's their way of signaling, I'm so hot that I can wear this garbage bag and still have guys after me. What do you got? A secret handshake. Exactly. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's Steve Jabba, Nick Krauser, Secret Society. Perfect. Thank you very much. The point I'm bringing here is once you get to that point where you have your attractive behaviors in place, you start to notice the behavior of women is different. And this is where, and I'd say it's probably one of the best relationship risk mitigation behaviors you can have. Because he brings up, and it's a pretty good point, that beta contempt is why women are the ones that feel justified and entitled to not only a divorce, but a vindictive and, yeah, a vindictive divorce. Just contempt. If a girl has contempt for a guy, he's no longer human. I'm sure you've seen this. If you want to know the true nature of a woman, see what she's like when she doesn't want anything from you, has no social repercussions for talking to you. and see how you're treated. That'll give you the true nature of women. Some women are still kind, but a lot of women will just treat you like garbage, and that's fine. They can get away with it, so why wouldn't they? So picture yourself as a husband who's always bringing home the bacon. You set yourself up from a legal standpoint to ensure that she's going to be taken care of regardless if you're there or not. She's stay-at-home mom. She's built no skills. You've decided to be the provider. The law states that, yeah, even if you leave, we don't want her starving in the street, and the state's not going to pay for her, so you can pay for her. You've basically set yourself up for failure. And then through all this time, you haven't built attractive behaviors or removed your unattractive behaviors. Case in point, the walking on eggshells we just talked about before, or the placative one. Anything that you do that's not aloof, self-interested, and all these provision behaviors are the antithesis of that. So you're going to eventually build up contempt. And then all you get from contempt, and it says it right here, like by the time you're being taken to the cleaners, she's merely carrying through with the legally accepted means of playing the real version of the Mary Shag kill, with you being the sap that she kills. Which is true. That's why, and I've mentioned it before, and a lot of guys didn't really notice until I brought it up, like how many of your divorces happened when the kids were about 5 years old? And it's a ton of guys. That 7-year mark. You get married, 2 years later, you decide to have kids, the kid turns 5. Now when the kid has gone to school, dad goes from being an essential thing to being a nice to have. So what happens there? Well, if she has contempt, she will wait out those 5 years. It's just like that jaded sailor who sits there waiting for his pension at the end of his 20-year mark. I know a couple of those guys. I'm good friends with those guys, and I can see it in their eyes. They're like, yeah, retirement's in 2023. Just got to sit it out and hear her nag me, and then my boss tell me this, that, or the other thing. Girls do the same thing. So by the time guys are talking about the unfairness of the court system, they've already skipped over the last 7 years that they've done building contempt, living for a narrative that only existed as advertising. Talk about living with blue pill illusions. And we call that the Disney fantasy. I always laugh because we call it the Disney fantasy. I think it's more accurate to call it the Norman Rockwell fantasy. But you'll see a lot of the purple pill debaters or the middle-aged soccer moms arguing the point, and they laugh like, well, which Disney movie is it that taught you guys to act so unattractive and get divorced? And you're like, it's funny. Autism is supposed to be a male affliction. But for some reason, middle-aged women love to pull that out when they need to. And he gets a little bit conspiracy-like here with the Brave New World Order, blue pill culture. I don't agree with this part only because I don't find advertising and culture to be something that drives this. I think it's something that people do when they know it sells. The same as here in the Manosphere. When guys talk about, or when Carl talked about 90% of the Manosphere being gossiping thoughts. Of course, because that is what builds content. That's the easiest, most effective content that you can build as a content creator that appeals to the kind of men who aren't sexually satisfied. You got two options. You got one, it's not your fault. Everybody else is bad. Everybody else is evil, and everything's against you. It's that martyr narcissistic fantasy. Again, you'll see narcissistic fantasies. I bring them up a lot. And it's the fuel for that. They call it narcissistic fuel. It reinforces this. Like if anybody were to call Beach Muscles the Mr. President, that feeds his narcissistic fantasy with narcissistic fuel. Same thing here. The second way, and it's slower, it's harder, but more rewarding, is to actually provide tools to get out of it. And that's ideally what I've been trying to do with you guys here. You'll have to ask amongst each other if it's being effective or not, or how it can be better. So we'll see how things go. I like to think it is. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. His openers are his closers. Nice. Oh, for crying out loud, the dogs. And that's essentially how we got to the red pill. Single guys have had their own times with it too. And that's a different story. I couldn't really explain the roadmap in quite as linear a fashion because it just kind of segued from pickup. Actually, I guess I could use Robert Fisher as the example for that. I think he was a good one, and I wish I could pull his thing up. I remember this. Back in the day, his Reddit handle was PK Atheist, and I kind of knew him, not from the very start. I didn't get involved for maybe the first 2 years there, but when he started it, he suggested that he didn't like the pickup community because it had essentially been invaded by female voices. Did the same thing that the Athol K married man sex life primer forums did. Small story before we get started. Athol K, if you guys don't know, is, I'd say, the premier married red pill creator of content. He created the male action plan, the married man sex life primer. He was essentially like a marriage counselor if they were useful and male oriented. Very awesome. Talks about fitness tests, all this stuff that you saw Hawaiian Libertarian kind of scratch the surface on. He got deep into it. Problem was, he did what a lot of guys that are in really good relationships do, and they forget why they got where they got, and they start treating their wife as an equal again. They start inviting her in. It's like, hey, our marriage is great. Why don't you start advising guys too? And you know what? I'll pull up this post too, because I always like it. Actually, no, we don't talk about it. It's called The Male Social Matrix. It's by Ian Ironwood. It's the redpillroom.blogspot. whatever your country code is. It's a wonderful thing. And he talks about male spaces and why they're so good, because they're generally a meritocracy based on competence. If you're more competent, you tend to rise higher up. Once you're in, like, it takes effort to get in. There's always some kind of a hazing or an entrance exam or some sort of testing for applicability and fitness. But then once you're in, you're in. It's very difficult to get booted out. It's like the blue wall. Now you add a woman to that, and the problem is a subset of them, usually the thirstiest of the group, that bottom 80%, now treats impressing the woman as the focus, whether they like it or they want to or they're not. A lot of guys just do it unconsciously. So once you get that, it ruins social cohesion and it elevates the woman to a position that's higher than what her merit would allow. Add a second girl there, and you add what's called a pivot, where they're able to feed off of each other, and they always take their side versus the guy's side, even though they may fight amongst each other constantly. A third woman, you're basically done. And that's what happened to Athol K. Brought his wife in, brought in female moderators, and it slowly devolved. And this is the same transition you saw in the pickup community when you got like RSD, Sarah, and that crap. Once you start adding girls there, they slowly shift things towards feeling their sensibilities. I want to feel good about this. Just be yourself and all that other woo-woo spiritual crap. Even assuming that they all meant well, girls just don't know how to be a guy. They don't. If they did, single moms wouldn't be the single biggest indicator as to whether a school shooter was a school shooter or not. Yeah, I'm sure you guys can see the stats. There's tons of MGTOWs that talk about how much damage a single mom can cause or what pitfalls there is. And we can argue whether that's actually the case or just that there's so many of them now that all the criminals get swept up into it. But whatever, it's not the point. So then the point, and then he eventually got to the point where the viewership went down, subscribership went down, and he had to shut the thing down. Had a heart attack, horrible situation. Financially, it was the worst thing for him. And I've always taken that as a reminder because I was around for when it finally shut down. And I remember the lesson that I took from that is you can't let women into male spaces. They just don't do it. So I created a rule for our subreddit where we had to get the girls out. Most of the time, they were pretty ornery anyway. Just we had a lot of hard-headed guys that didn't allow it. But then we started noticing every time they come out with a post, even if it wasn't very good advice, guys would be all over it. All the new guys. And it was just, you have to save guys from themselves. It's not that women are bad. It's just that guys are thirsty. And so PK Atheist, back to the red pill and the single guys, he decided to make a red pill forum because he goes, look, the pickup community used to be great. And then he used some like examples. I'm with this girl. She cheated on me. What happened? And he goes, this is what mainstream advice is. This is what the pickup artist advice is. And it was always about assigning blame. Well, it's just, she was a bad apple. You'll find yourself a better one. Just be yourself. And he goes, well, that's not useful to me because that doesn't help me. That doesn't help me understand why it happened or what I can do to avoid it in the future. And he uses a couple different examples. He goes, I created this space. So when something like this happens, we can understand it better. And that was right around the time, I believe Rollo had Rational Male book 1 out by then. And he goes, that's perfect. We got a roadmap right here. So we understand what hypergamy means. We understand a lot of the pickup culture. We understand a lot of the MRA stuff, a lot of the MGTOW stuff. And we can put it together for strategy. And that, I would say, is the pinnacle point where single people specifically had their red pill. So we have Hawaiian Libertarian, the red pill subreddit. From 2009 to 2012 is kind of where all this stuff formed. It's really cool, by the way, if you ever get into it. Royce was leading the charge there with nothing but field reports and observations. Eventually, when he had enough, he would wrap a theory around it. Roosh during his heyday, same thing here. And then you get to where we are now. And I really like being, I don't want to call myself a historian, but I do like sticking to the fundamentals because I find it's very easy to lose sight of that. Now, if a lot of guys don't know, if you don't focus on, look, the world's going to do what the world's going to do. You're not going to save the West. The West doesn't want to be saved. We can get into that. I might do the second hour talking about some of the posts of Whisper, which is one of my favorite writers. I would say between U.E. McGill, Whisper, Human Sock Puppet, Mine More Please, probably my favorite Reddit posters in Archwinger. Some guys single, some guys relationships, some guys married. One guy's even got himself a harem. Some of the best writing out there, and it really behooves you guys, instead of listening again to Coach Great Adams talk about how women ain't shit, or Donovan pointing out celebrity culture, God bless his heart, or us even talking about this stuff. Go back to this stuff. It's amazing the kind of mental models you can pull out from it with just enough evolutionary psychology sprinkled in to kind of give you an understanding as to why it's the way it is. Lee in the chat here had a good point too. He says failure to launch is when you fail in life as a man, you feel insecure and angry, and then you blow up. Yes, a really good point. I actually had a post on this called Replacing Our Fathers. And it was watching my stepdad, probably one of the most alpha heavy guys that I can think of. He slept with like half the neighborhood, worked in the bush, very tough guy. But I remember this. It was one time that we almost got into a fight. I would have been 18. I just came back from college for the summer. I won't bore you with the details there, but I was always like my mom's little bastard. Never even had a name. Till the day that I stood up to him, was going to fight him. Probably would have kicked my ass. But then after that, he actually opened up and treated me like a friend. So it was kind of funny. It taught me there. Kind of started crying. It was weird. I kind of regret that decision to this day because I'm like, I liked it better when I hated you. And then he taught me all these guys were like ultra alpha males, and I would consider him like a blue pill alpha because they never knew how to develop strategies, how to think about the world, how to deal with hardships. They just knew I'm a man. The strong back will get me through everything and aloofness. But then when these problems happen, guys don't know how to deal with it. And this is where people sort of get it right in that men need more mental health, but they extremely get it wrong when they tell you that guys need to cry and talk about their feelings more. No, they don't. They don't need to do that. It's unattractive. You don't want it because anger is a male emotion and you don't want to see that. We already know that. We know it's bad because even guys getting angry, girls want them to not be angry. And we see that examples everywhere. But it's so bad that even if guys go and make themselves a small little closet, a small little corner of the internet where they can be mad inside that thing and compartmentalize it, girls still don't want that. Everybody hates it. An angry guy is the scariest thing ever, to the point where even a guy giving an angry field report online is enough to build 5 feminist outrage posts in a mainstream media article. So don't tell me that you want guys to express emotions. You don't. But the thing about anger is it has to come with some sort of mentorship and guidance. Yeah, you get angry. You get angry because a grievance has happened and there's some kind of social grievance and pain combined together. Anger is a very social emotion. It's different than rage that way. It's not that, and I'm going to use some extreme examples here. Let's say a meteor fell from the sky, kills your family. You'll be sad, but you won't be angry because it's act of God, can't do anything about it. Nobody's fault. But if somebody comes in, murders your whole family, then you're angry because that person caused a grievance on your life. You stub your toe, you may be hurt, but you're not angry. If somebody hits your toe, you're angry. So anger comes from a social grievance. Now, the problem is a guy has that anger. His brain has built his neuroplasticity, or I think what did Keone Galt refer to it as here? I think he called it persuasive or something. I just mentioned at the beginning. You think I can remember? Blah, blah, blah. I think he just called it mindset. Oh, yeah, because the mindset. So you get these things. Now, what do you do with it? The problem is once you're angry, your brain is a sponge and you're ready for new information. And right now, this is where you're supposed to have, gentlemen's clubs back before they were strip clubs, or good buddies. And they're supposed to say, yeah, my wife did this too. This is what I did. This is what I did. And naturally, you only have maybe a half a dozen guys you can reach upon. So your experience is limited. But with the internet, we've expanded that to the point that you have a million guys on speed dial. If you have an issue, to go look it up. And that's how most guys find the married red pill, is they would basically type their problem into the search bar. Why won't my wife do this? And then it turns out they come to a post from the married red pill that is their exact situation written by another guy with 50 comments below it by guys who have been in that same situation and what they did about it. And then from there, they'll see a link to a post where a guy puts a theory together based on all those 100 different field reports. Because you notice, hey, we're really good at pattern recognition. This, and this seem to be a good indicator as to when this is going to happen and what you can do about it. And that's how we get this body of work, these tools. If you're not the kind of guy who has that certain situation happen to you, then you don't need the strategies. That's why this is not an ideology. It's not a what you should do. It's just an if. It's a hypothetical imperative. If you're having this issue, then do this. If, then else. I find it wonderful. You guys like this one, by the way? I thought a little bit of a history lesson would be kind of a neat thing. Kind of tapped us into it. Let me... Let's see if this goes to where I want. Yeah, I guess that'll work good enough. And this is where we get into kind of like the second generation of guys. So we're past the days of Athol Kay, Ian Ironwood, Keone Galt, Royce, I would say for the most part too, Roosh and them. And we get into like the second generation of red pilled posters. And that's where we get into Whisper, Human Sock Puppet, Archwinger, UEM McGill, Scorchsang. For authors, I guess I could put Carl in this one. Carl's kind of an outlier because he's really knowledgeable about this stuff, but he never really engaged with the other people. So he's like on an island. So I like him for that anyway. And Whisper has this great post on trp.red. Hypergamy is monogamy. And this is where guys take the theories and the field reports and they kind of put it together into some coherent plans. I believe he's also got some experience in evolutionary psychology in that. And then he brings up why, and this is the part I was going to talk about for the second half here, hypergamy. Everybody loves hypergamy. It's the favorite red pill topic du jour. Hypergamy and AWOLT. I would say those are the two big ones. No, I don't know who Kasibi is. And it's funny because a lot of guys talk about hypergamy, and they take the most autistic take on it ever. They just assume that means a girl is always on the hunt. If she could jump ship to find a guy who's slightly better, she's going to take it. It's not the case. It's not how it works. A girl will look for her best option, whether it's for a night, whether it's for a lifetime, and that all depends on what she wants out of life at that given moment in a very short-term thinking way. If she's 20, she wants the hottest guy she can find. If she's 30, she wants the best husband she can find. Like, you get the idea. But hypergamy runs underneath all of those ones. And this is the part that I would probably say is best exemplifies the idea of hypergamy. Hypergamy happens because women are monogamous and men aren't. Whisper then goes into the story where he talks about if you're at a party and you're a guy, you'll see 10 girls there that are totally doable, but you can only take one home, but anyone will do. A girl will go to that party and not see those 10 hot guys. She'll see one hot guy that she really wants, and the other guys don't exist. And so she'll fight for that one guy. She would rather go home alone than settle for second best. I always think it's an Oscar Wilde quote, but I could be wrong, where guys like infinite variety, but girls are simple. They'll settle for the best. Pretty good for a gay guy to know that much about women. And so that's the key to hypergamy. Guys want more, girls want top. And that's why you can't really say, I don't want hypergamy. A girl's going to want the best. And when she gets the best, she's going to be fiercely loyal to the best for as long as she considers them the best. It's just the way the world works. Now, part of that is going to be self-delusion. There's always a better guy. There's always somebody better. But in the same way, that unattractive people tend to find people at about their level of attractiveness. Our brain, and I couldn't even explain why, we have processes that kind of align our expectations with reality. We know, and that's, you notice the guys who are sexually unsuccessful are ones who have a damage to that part of their wiring. So if you're a 5, you're generally going to find a 5 to be the hottest. You're going to think, oh, those bar sluts aren't hot. Stacy, the nerd that plays Fortnite, she's the hot one for me. That's your brain kind of working within its expectations. Or, an introverted girl won't like that super social Chad guy. She'll like a super antisocial, like an author type. But it's always the best. But then once they find it, it's kind of like locking mode until some point where she's knocked out of that hypergamous stupor. And that's the same concept as when we talk about wife goggles. If you guys don't know, hey, buddy, you can jump if you want. All right, we're going to invite Chomsky to the stream. My favorite of the Dergs. Wife goggles is the process of men's aspirational love. When we date a girl, she's never going to be that 40-year-old mama 3. To us, she's always going to be that same 23-year-old thought that we picked up at the bar or Tinder or wherever you found her, church. And so long as you're sexually satisfied and she's pleasant for the most part, I'm not going to say no fights or anything like that, but in general, you don't loathe seeing her. You're going to keep those things on, and it takes a lot of work to remove them. That's why a girl cheating was a good one to do it. It's the weirdest thing because not even hitting you, because guys have this learned helplessness mechanism that still allows them to keep going back to the girl if you're smacking them around. But once they're slapped off, they're gone forever. Women, it's a little different, but it's the same concept. That as long as you're her best option, she's fiercely loyal to you until she isn't. And that's where the concept of she's not yours, it's just your turn comes from. So a guy understands, okay, as long as I'm her best option in her eyes, and that's the subjective part in her mind. Some guys could be on top of the world. I have a client right now, actually, who's, military, doctor, very switched on, knows exactly what he's doing. He's top tier man by any calculation you could do. But the wife got bored and she just went with something different. It happens. It is what it is. This is why you kind of have to understand it's not yours, it's just your turn, because there's no amount of working out he could have done to stop that. There is no extra thing he could have done that would have prevented that. Sure, maybe if he had gone completely aloof and disengaged from the marriage altogether, she might have fought to stay back. But these aren't things that people can rationally and reasonably expect to do within a marriage. So you just have to set your standards, you set your boundaries, you set your quality, and you set your expectations of yourself and those around you, and people can either choose to fit within them or they can't. And that's tied with a certain level of risk management within a relationship. Obviously, the don't get married, don't get yourself a stay-at-home mom. These kind of set of principles will allow you then to have a good Overton window of your life. All right, so this happens. If it's great, if we end up dying together at 97 years old, that's awesome. If Karen ends up leaving and taking the kids, I've set up so the floor or the worst case scenario is something I can live with as well. So now this is where abundance comes from, or outcome independence. You know all the outcomes and you're comfortable with all of them. So you can act in a way that's better towards your best interests. And you don't have to worry about walking on eggshells or placating women or never saying a mean thing or being worried about threat point. As you should. How dare you, Michelle? That's fine. It's first thing in the morning. So I expect people to, if you've been out partying on a Friday, you're probably going to listen to this hungover. Ideally, I'd love if you listen to it at the gym on Saturday morning. But I like this one because it's kind of this is the downtime that everybody should be having. I don't think anybody's getting drunk and hitting on chicks at 8 in the morning on a Saturday. So, but that's kind of the goal. It's not, I want to be the biggest alpha male that ever alphaed with the Lamborghini and $1 million in the bank. No, it's like you're generally fulfilled. And if you want to pursue your $1 million fortune, or maybe you just want to live off in the woods and kind of off grid, like wherever you fall on that spectrum of what success you want, everything else is kind of covered. And I don't mean covered as in there's not going to be any hardships. I mean covered as in you have a safety net. Post from Rollo. Where he talks about the safety net, where one of his readers actually noticed that was the benefit of this stuff. It's not do X, Y, and Z and your waifu unicorn will love you forever and never cheat on you. It's like, no. It's that when something happens that's outside of the ordinary, outside of the norm, I get A, some idea as to why it happened, the underlying mechanisms, and B, things I can either do to lessen the likelihood of it happening or recover from it in a way that's best for me. It's like I said, it's a safety net. And I think that's a wonderful thing to do. And it's why it always irks me when I hear people talk about this like an ideology. It's like nobody gives a shit what you want to do. You do what you want to do. But once you decide on something you want to do, all we got to establish is A, is it reasonable? And B, if it is reasonable or possible, what are strategies you can use to best achieve that outcome or get as close to it as you can? And that's all we're doing here, just praxeology. Oh, it's 6 p.m. over there, Michelle. About to hit the gym now. That's awesome. 4 p.m. in Germany. Nice. Guten Tag, Schwul. Am I pronouncing that one right? Yeah, my Swiss German is absolutely abysmal, which is weird because when I speak French, people think I sound German. Anyways, let's stick with the chat here. Larger screen so we can see the Derg. There's not much to see. Yeah, for those who are listening to this one, I have 3 Italian Greyhounds, and my favorite one is Chomsky. I have Chomsky, Hitchens, and Sagan. I know there's this thing about little dogs, but you know what? For a guy, he sleeps 20 hours a day. He doesn't eat me out of house and home. And he's got a 6-pack. So what can I say? It's a red pill dog. Plus, since he's had his teeth removed, he's got these 2 scars permanently in his mouth. So he kind of looks like the Joker. Where was I going with this one? Oh, yeah. So the end of the life. So that's kind of the end of this. Now we got all that stuff out of the way. That's all well and good. I think you guys got a good understanding of what it means to be red pill, 100% on the basics, and getting a little bit into the theory, the field reports, and that. I would say for further reading, you guys should check out Royce, Rollo, Roosh. Well, pre-religious Roosh. I don't know what the new thing is there. But that's kind of the issue that a lot of guys have. 2 things that end up being harmful for you as a red pill dude. First one, getting a girlfriend and finding out you've been LARPing this whole time. That's the Illimitable Man thing. That's the Roosh thing. A lot of guys do that. As soon as they get into a relationship, all of a sudden, everything that they've known and understood and worked well with their entire, I don't want to say career, but their entire time in pickup or red pill or whatever. And then all of a sudden they throw it all away because they found one, they found the unicorn. They're walking on eggshells. They don't want to say some of the harsher things that we talk about here because, yeah, while they may be true, they'll hurt her feelings. And she's so good to me, I just want to reward her. And they want to reward her by being the exact opposite of the attractive person that attracted her in the first place. And it's horrible because these are the ones you're going to see flipping every 6 months. Oh, she's the greatest thing ever. Women are great. Mark Manson's a great example. As soon as he got married, men are trash and women are great. And then they'll get separated or they'll get divorced and they're right back to, hey guys, remember how bad women are? Am I right? And you're like, holy geez, man. Like, calm down. Women are women. Here's the things they do. Here's the ways that we can articulate it. Yeah, in their head, they have different reasons for doing it, but that's what they're thinking is irrelevant. We can't be inside a girl's head, and there's nothing in there for you anyway. So let her think what she thinks. Just notice what's going on and wrap it around a narrative that makes sense for you. Good enough. I think Lee put it good here too in the chat. Lee Comstock. If you're walking on eggshells, you're going to get burned. Agreed. These displays of lower value will cause a girl to build up resentment over time. And the problem with a resentful girl that has disdain for you is that she has the tools to capitalize on that. So it's really just a bad strategy all around. So that's the one. And then the other side of things we go is the guy that's in the perpetual anger phase because it's cathartic. And this is for the kind of guy who isn't putting in any work or adopting any strategies towards his life. He doesn't want to win. He just wants an excuse why losing wasn't his fault. And I think it's a horrible one. Luckily, it's also the most temporary one because most guys who are like this get out of it within a certain length of time. You'll see the teenagers talking about how they can't get a woman. They'll hit their 20s and start finding their stride. Awesome. The problem is there's always new churn. As guys figure things out, they move on. Even the guys that kind of sort of muddle their way through it and get a girlfriend, they move on too. But then there's a new group of guys who are sexually frustrated and coming in with all the anger. So from an outside perspective, it just looks like a big pot of seething anger. When in reality, it's like a constant churn of attrition. New meat comes in, new meat goes out. And then that's the problem, because who's going to stay in this space if you're an attractive, charismatic guy? I don't know why I'm here half the time. Carl doesn't know why he's here. Rolo, Rich, even John. Like, what is wrong with these people? But then I always look back to my old field reports to when I was in my little anger phase. And I'm like, all right, I get it. And I think that's why all you guys, if you are writing field reports, and I suggest you do for multiple reasons, but in this case, I'm suggesting because what's going to happen is if you're putting in work, if you're building a strategy tool chest, if you're achieving things in life that you aim to achieve and you're getting to the way that you want to live, you're going to hit a point where you're kind of above it all. You don't have to worry about hypergamy anymore because you are the girl's best option, or you're multiple girls' best options, or you're fine being her multiple option for the night and you got your plate spinning and everything is going great. It's very easy then to forget bad stuff. Like, I'll tell you a story on this. When I was deployed, we were going around Horn of Africa looking for Somali pirates. And I remember at the time I was like, oh, I'm going to write this stuff down. I'm at a little journal, kind of write down, day one, blah, 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 blah. Was just kind of for my own edification. I wasn't planning on a memoir or anything. And I remember after the first month, I just stopped because I'm like, every day sucks and is exactly the same. Long bouts of overworked boredom interspersed with occasional like extreme action, which is awesome. And this is something that the guys were talking about. Everybody complained about the trip, the entire trip. And I'm like, don't worry about it, guys. In a year from now, we're going to forget all this crap. And we're only going to remember the fun time we had, like the ramp in Dubai, the splunking in Oman, the time in Croatia. That's the only part we're going to remember. And sure enough, 12 months later, all I can remember about that deployment was like a year-long party, even though I know it wasn't, because I wrote down exactly why and how it sucked. Relationships are the same way. As soon as it starts getting good, put a little bit of time in there, you're going to forget about all the worst case scenario stuff. This is when, and it's the one thing, I wouldn't suggest it's an ideal strategy, and I don't think it's too effective, but I understand where it's coming from. I'm sure you guys have seen situations where somebody gets cheated on and they take the girl back and then it goes on and everything is great. It's mostly that same phenomenon that, time plus good behavior equals forgetfulness. So you get there and you got to write down what you did before. That's where I'm going with this. The field reports, write down to when things were at their worst and go back every now and again. I've always told guys too, if you look back at your field report from a year ago and you don't cringe at how unattractive and weird that guy was and you don't laugh at him, then you haven't made progress like you should. And I think a lot of these guys that all of a sudden they get a little bit of success for a somewhat sustained period of time, and then they start kicking the ladder out from under them, telling guys that they're trash and they just got to man up and do more chores and that crap. I think they're using a huge disservice, and it's not their fault because they're just forgetful, because they're meat puppets the same as the rest of us. So if you don't want to be one of those guys, and I would suggest you don't, because you're actively kicking the ladder out from under you. You're ensuring that the people that come after you are going to be continually unattractive because you're not telling them the things they need to hear. So yeah, do write down the things that happened. Have some sort of memory about it. And never forget how bad things could be. At the very least, that little pain in the background will keep you sharp. You don't want to be that guy who's working in a mechanic shop, forgetting that time that the car dropped and killed a dude. And then you start getting very safe and complacent until another accident happens. You don't want to be that guy. Yeah, so I'm going to end this up here in the next 10 minutes. I'm going to have some breakfast before we hit down to rule 0. Until then, let's take this last time and let's talk to you guys. Everybody who's taken their Saturday morning decided to give me an hour and a half of their time to ramble on about Whisper, Hawaiian Libertarian. Let's see how you guys are doing. I like to put my wiener in her head. Okay, Marty. Oh, you guys. Okay, I can't talk about this one then. We'll just read this one. Somali Pirate OOS. I have a Navy friend who did that. Is that an EVE Online, Abby, by the way? Absolutely hilarious. Yeah, it was The deployment was kind of neat. It was weird because Canada sent 3 ships. We had an East Coast ship and 2 West Coast ships. So we went down to the Panama Canal, cut through, came back up to Halifax, and then went across the Suez Canal, and then fooled around in Africa there. Awesome, circumnavigated the globe. The weird part about the trip, though, is it was during... So they were saying we were looking for heroin, but it eventually shifted to pirates because it was the poppy growing season. So you can't, if you guys don't know about heroin, it comes from poppies. So while they're growing, you can't be shipping heroin to find. But it was a really good narrative, got a lot of captains on board because a couple years back, one of our ships had found something like $100 million worth of cocaine or heroin. I can't remember, some drug. Dunked it into the ocean. It was a huge thing you could brag about at cocktail parties from here to the end of time. So that was our kind of plan there. We never ended up finding it. So we eventually had to switch to pirates. But Canada got to be in charge, and so that's why we did it. It was very cool. But that story's kind of boring. Jim Bob's got something here that I actually kind of like. So the biggest shift for him is understanding what Frame was and internalizing the concepts and acting congruently to his best interests in map. Night and day difference from what I thought. Also, thank you, Zap Blast. Yeah, Frame. Jim Bob's got it 100% right. And the starkest difference, some guys are going to be extremely codependent. And once they get past that hurdle of having to look at their own self-interest as first, and then trickle down into others, the benevolent dictator mental model. It's such a night and day difference. It's like the equivalent of sitting down one day and realizing you've learned how to speak Mandarin. But thank you, Zap. I do want to have Carl back. Now that Carl's back, once he's better, having him back on here because I miss chatting with him. He's so much fun. But yeah, Zap, thank you very much. I try not to think of like, how much do I bring to the table and is it worth it? I just want to make sure I deliver as good a product as I can to as many people as I can for a price point that is good. Like, I don't think if I charge $30 a month when you guys just come here and listen to these podcasts, I would think that's definitely outskewed. So right now, I think the advertising revenue, the Patreon stuff, I think we hit a nice little thing here. And ideally, I've always looked at the Red Pill space as from a content creator perspective, the way that a lawyer looks at law as opposed to how a celebrity looks at fame. I think a lot of guys in the manosphere, they want to be that next Jordan Peterson. And I can tell because as soon as Jordan Peterson's daughter was hanging out with Tate, side note, by the way, isn't it funny how every time there's like a ultra trad voice out there, there always has to be something to do with Tate there in front of one of his daughters or his girlfriend or something. It's just one of those things. I was trying to think who's the other one. There was Peterson's daughter hanging out with him, and yeah, whatever. Doesn't really matter. All right, dog number 2. Yeah, so they want to be the center of attention. It's the brand of me. Everybody wants to be the biggest, next biggest thing. They want to have 1 million subscribers and be super popular. I don't want that shit. I would never. I think my biggest thing that would bother me, and I know it's never going to happen for anybody in the Red Pill space anyway, the idea of having that kind of fame where you can't go anywhere without people recognize you and bothering you. Like to get a pack of gum would take you 30 minutes because of all the autographs. I would hate to be in that. All right, John, I'll take a look at your cooking videos. Instead, it's like a lawyer. We have material, and the material stands on its own. So if we can give guys advice that allows them to succeed, I think that's a much better model for the red pilled space. And obviously, you got to have some level of personality, some level of brand. I can't just be an unattractive guy with a stupid avi of me talking about MGTOW, this and that. That's another reason why MGTOWs are never, or MRAs, I say, we're never really going to have any level of success because they're just not attractive enough. I think my girl's cooking peppers. Getting a bit of tear gassing here. Awesome, though. It's going to be very delicious. You're never going to be attractive enough to swing enough people. So all you can really do is kind of sulk with others. So that's why I really don't agree with MGTOW as a strategy, at least from a content creation standpoint. I don't know if they're screwing around or not. I just know right around the time that she was getting divorced, they had that photo on Instagram together and everybody kind of freaked out. Well, I don't know if I could say I'm funnier than Joe Rogan. Joe's damned hilarious. He's always been good, except for news radio, but who cares? It's the 90s. Really? Oh, fair enough. Before we get on this one, yeah, honestly, stuff like that would be cool. I like Joe Rogan. I occasionally watch a show if it's a guest I really enjoy, but I don't really need or want fame. I just want to be able to earn enough of a living out of this and cause enough, leave the world better than I found it, I guess is the best way to say. Like, I've already seen a few guys that are getting their lives back together, specifically here, not from before. I'm perfectly happy with that. And yeah, I'm perfectly comfortable with that. Like I said, life's already pretty good. If it was just money I wanted, I'd be going back to corporate in a heartbeat. They pay way better. And I get to wear a suit every day. Again, from Joe Bob, Joe Rogan is nice when he has scientists and experts in their field on, but a lot of it is just giving you a dopamine rush with not getting anything done. It's procrastination. Yeah, infotainment, 100%. And that's my big problem with a lot of the intellectual space. And there's a lot of guys that are calling themselves Red Pill that are doing that right now. I don't like it. They're reading Evola. They're doing the philosophy warrior king thing. But I've noticed, and I can't remember who quoted this, but there's always two arguments. There's the argument to do something, and then there's the argument to not do something. And I find the intellectual, philosophical side of things is just a general idea of masturbation. You can act like you're doing something, you're becoming more enlightened, but nothing's actually coming out the other end. There's no outputs. And so I don't like that. And I try my best not to get too philosophical on these things because it doesn't really help anybody. Like, philosophy is not going to make your wife want to sleep with you. It's not going to get you that. It's not going to get you a plate. It's not going to do anything. Hey, buddy, careful. Another one here from Chris. It's a good question. What's the best forum or website to post field reports? Well, that all depends. There's obviously the Married Red Pill for guys in relationships. There's an Own Your Shit Weekly thread, which is nice. A lot of guys aren't comfortable with that one, though, because it's fairly open and public. And they'll probably boot you if you don't have consistency. So that's why on my side, I had the Patreon private community. So for our weekly Q&As, it's guys essentially doing their field reports because there's a level of discretion there. There's a very small group of people. It's not publicly available. So you can complain, or I don't like complaints. Like, the one victim puke is fine, but you can mention these private or details and they won't end up coming up to bite you in the ass during a divorce hearing or something. Oh, that makes sense. I do. There we go. Peach iced tea. Never not enjoy peach iced tea. You Americans do one thing right, and that's that. No, I'm just joking. There's that as well. But here's the thing. So for field reports, depending on how much feedback you need, sometimes just having your own like hidden blog or notepad or even just a booklet is a good enough. The purpose of a field report is and writing is thinking, and this is the point of it. So as you write things down, you're going to notice a few things. As you write a field report, you're structuring it properly, and that'll tell you about how you structure it is how you're approaching your life. If you see very early field reports, it's guys complaining and explaining their wife did this, their wife did that, their wife did that. It's 100% she statements. And so it shows you two things. One, the guy has no frame. He's writing his life story from the perspective of the woman in the story. Absolutely horrible. So then it realized right there, okay, so then as you read it back, you count the she statements, you count the I statements, you realize, oh, turns out frame is my problem. All right, so that gives you like a starting point. And then as you read it, and this is the part where feedback's really helpful, is you're going to have to write, and you only have so much space. I'd say 1,000 words is probably the most you're ever going to see in a field report. Usually 500. But with that limited space, guys have to pick and choose which details they think are important enough to mention and what background they consider important. And right there, that tells you everything you need to know. If you're the kind of guy who can go back, look through your writing and see, oh, so I wrote about this event happening and I decided that this, and this were important. Another person who's been through that could go, well, why didn't you mention this? You mentioned this huge field report about how your wife doesn't find you attractive, and nowhere in here have you mentioned like what your lifting schedule's like, what your pickup experience is like, what your diet is like, or what your physique is like. So right there, that lets you know a lot of guys think they're attractive, but they don't actually objectively check if they're attractive. And so it's usually the case for most of these guys talking about how their wife doesn't desire them. They look like the kind of guy that no girl desires. So right there, that lets you know it's like, A, the guy's deluding himself thinking that he's intrinsically valuable, which he isn't. And B, it lets you know what he's been avoiding. The dogs are Italian Greyhounds. They're a little smaller. A Whippet's like 30 pounds. They wouldn't fit on my lap like that. But yeah, the small, medium, and large of the Greyhounds. Greyhound, Whippet, Italian Greyhound. That's another aspect of field reports at school. So yeah, what did he leave out is always more important than what did he put in, because you'll see very obvious things. And then at the same time, you'll see the self-reflection. If a guy just has a complaint letter about his girl and then it ends with nothing, then it says he's not doing anything. And so that lets you know right there, well, your problem is you're not taking any steps. You just want to complain. And that's when you end up acting, like I said, men acting like malfunctional women. Women love to complain. It's just something they do. They don't have the arm to, build themselves a new house, so they'll just complain about being homeless. It's the general idea. So when you see that, you see, okay, so it's usually feminine behaviors that are creating too many errant mental models in a guy's life, and he needs to basically just nut up and start taking action. And then you say, for some things, there are very obvious action you can take. And this is another one where field reports are good for feedback. A guy will see your problem, and it's a very clear point A to point B kind of thing to solve. If your problem is your girl spending too much money, all right, well, why aren't you taking away her visa? And that's when you get to that, the guys will start making excuses, is the follow-up to their field reports. And that's where it's helpful too. And this is one where you kind of have to bite the bullet. And like I said, the Patreon has a small level of, like a very high level of discretion. Your personal stuff will have 100% level of discretion. A public space will have more opportunity for feedback, but there's no discretion. And you'll see guys, they'll offer like, hey, if you're being spent at a house and home, why aren't you confiscating the visa? Why aren't you putting her on a budget? There's a whole bunch of techniques you can use, the envelopes, this, that, and the other thing. And then the guy starts arguing with the advice. And it tells you right there that that's not the issue and there's something underlying to it. And you'll see more often than not, especially with the money one, the issue isn't the spending. The issue is that he's afraid to confront his wife or his girl. And so for all these benefits alone, you got to pick your level of discretion for your field reports to achieve the goal you're looking for. And if you don't know which one to do, at least just start writing one and keeping it on your own and see if you can look at it yourself. It'll at least help you. If you're not seeing anything out of it that you can learn from, then you realize you need some feedback. This one here from Red Pill Pinoy. Spinning plates, and my wife probably knows it. She still chooses to be with me. Is this normal? Yes. Well, it's not normal, but it's not unheard of. Problem is, and this is something you're going to have to know on your own, and we're going to end with this story, by the way. It's either that thing we talked about before, the beta resentment, or it is a girl would rather share a high-value man as opposed to be saddled with a beta, I think is how Rollo puts it. So if you are high quality, high value, and not hiding the badness, I guess the way to put it. It's weird because they've gotten to the point now where I can't remember who did the study, but the findings were when it came to cheating or infidelity in a relationship, it wasn't the sex that bothered the women the most. It was the lying and the idea of him possibly having an emotional connection with another person. Now, assuming you're top tier, you're her best option, that sort of thing, she'll excuse a lot of behavior, assuming she always gets your emotional fulfillment, emotional connection. She's basically got the best of you. And then the idea of having to put up, well, he's just going to be a dog. Some girls can live with that. If you guys don't believe me, think of the married guy who has a side piece who stays with him for years on the promise that he's going to leave his wife for her, even though he never will. That's a very stable, soft harem situation. Stable enough. Now, not the kind of thing that happens forever either, because once you cease to become her best option, that is a very quick way of building a seething resentment. It's the equivalent of you being in some kind of male competition. You're playing a football game, with a bunch of weenies on the other team, and they beat you. Nothing bothers you more than losing to somebody that you shouldn't have lost to. And that's the same mentality that women take towards it. So if you're the guy that's cheating on her and it's embarrassing her because, dude, he cheats with her on me, nah. Now, girls are smart and forward thinking to a certain extent. In this case, if you have like a brand new child at home, she'll probably wait till the kid turns 5 and then she can go out and do her own thing. Or some women will wait until the last kid is out of the house and moved on their own and become adults. And at that point, right during the empty nester phase is when she leaves. My mom was that example for the second husband. And the first example was the leave when the kids were ready to go to school. So it's a dangerous game in the sense that if you're on top of the world, yeah, it can be a somewhat stable situation. But any type of slip-ups, the odds of her trying to be vindictive and get revenge on you for it are high. So I wouldn't say it's common. I wouldn't say it's uncommon. Just be aware of what you're getting into, what the ramifications are. The best strategy I've seen to go against that is something I think Whisper talks about with his. He lives with 2 girls right now, I think, and they're kind of in a stable situation there. I don't know much more about it than that I want to talk about here, but that's the case that the guy treats. It's not cheating. He just has another girl on the side. The other one knows about it. Everybody's good, and the roles are somewhat stable. That's a very advanced topic, and I am not nearly qualified enough to talk about it, but just be aware that that's another avenue to take there. So I hope that helps you. I know it's not the answer you wanted here, but like I said, I try not to delve too much into stuff that I don't have a good body of work or experience to draw on. So that's the best that I've got so far. Maybe I should ask actually, see about getting Whisper. I don't know if he ever wants to put his voice out there on the internet, but I would love to sit here and pick his brain for like an hour or two and just chit chat. This example, I'll end on this and then we'll leave the cast. This is the example of the beta cheating, the resentful one. If you're doing this, you're setting yourself up for failure. Like getting another girl, there is no more blatant level of investment you're putting into a girl than getting her pregnant. And I guarantee you, whatever wife you're with, if you knock up the babysitter, is going to be resentful on this one. Also, the fact that it's a babysitter thing, I don't like that in this risk-prone environment, because the instant the babysitter thinks that you're not her best option, that's where like a harassment or sexual assault allegation come into play here. So so it's not so much that, but it's both around as your plates. And that's one of those, I don't want to say consent as in like you go all talk about it, but it's kind of something that you have to drift into, and it has to be natural in the sense that a date from a pickup perspective is natural. A lot of logistics on your end seems seamless and natural to the other people, but on your side, there's a lot of work put in. But again, I don't want to delve too much into topics that I'm not the most knowledgeable on. I've never actually lived with 2 women at the same time that weren't just roommates. So I'm sure maybe we'll get Jack Murphy. He does like that kind of thing. But yeah, Whisper. And I agree. He would be an awesome guest. But on that note, we're kind of running out of time here. I'm going to go have some breakfast in 45 minutes. Rich Cooper's channel, Rule Zero. Can't remember the topic on this one, but it's going to be a lot of fun. But I'll catch you guys in the next one. Cheers.